Literally meaning the Emperor's Battle, the Kaiserschlacht would be the last and final push by the Germans to end the war in a victory against the Allies. Despite being a map in Battlefield 1, the Germans never actually made it to Amiens during this operation, and were actually halted just east of the town. The Kaiserschlacht would be the beginning of the end for the Germans. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Real History Of, an episodic web series where I take a look at the real history of the various events and figures of popular video games. I'm your host Christopher, the video game historian, and on this episode, I'm going to take a look at one of my favorite operations in the game, the real history of the Kaiserschlacht. Also known as the German Spring Offensive, this would be their last effort to try and win the war. General Erich Ludendorff devised a plan which would place a wedge between the French and British troops, as well as to capture the town of Amiens, which was a strategic railway hub, as well as to weaken the Allies so much that a counterattack would be impossible. As early as autumn of 1917, the German government was convinced that the British forces had been exhausted, especially after their defeats at Messines, Passchendaele, and Cambrai, and that one final big offensive would turn the tides. It also helped the Germans that the Russians had left the war, as they were able to free up some 500,000 troops from the Eastern Front for this operation. He also wanted to launch this offensive before any fresh American troops could arrive. On March 21st, 1918, in the Saint-Quentin sector, the Germans launched their massive offensive against the British, starting with a 5-hour bombardment of their front lines that landed roughly 2 million shells on them. Following the bombardment, the elite German stormtroopers began their attack of the British lines. While the British were spread out along a 60-meter front, believing that they would be outflanked, the stormtroopers were actually planning on concentrating on one area of the line. Using the cover of fog, the German 2nd and 18th armies managed to sneak up on the British, taking their 3rd and 5th armies by surprise, causing panic among them and forcing them to retreat. By March 23rd, the Germans were able to recapture all the territory they had lost in the previous 2 years around the Somme. The next day, they brought in 3 massive Krupp guns, the largest artillery guns in the world at the time, and fixed their sights on Paris, only 120 kilometers away. A shell from these guns could reach the city within 200 seconds, and nearly 200 shells fell on Paris. The Germans kept up their advance, and by March 29th, had already captured key Allied towns of Péronne, Ham, Noyon, Roye, Montdidier, Albert, and Bapaume, with the 18th Army already at the gates of Amiens. However, despite their haste, they arrived well ahead of their supply convoy and began to run out. With supplies low, the Germans killed their horses for meat and looted the town of Albert for supplies. On March 31st, General Ludendorff had rested his men for just a few days. However, this would give the Allies enough time to become well defended. Additional reinforcements for the Allies were already beginning to refill the ranks of the British and French armies. The 3rd and 4th Australian armies were already en route to help plug the gaps, and fresh American troops would be arriving in April. Once replenished with fresh troops, the British and Australian armies had put up a defensive at Villers-Bretonneux, just east of Amiens, to prevent the progress of the German army, and the French reinforced their positions in the south to do the same. It would be at the Battle of Villers-Bretonneux that the first tank-on-tank battle would happen, with 3 British landships engaging 3 German A-7V tanks, which were all either knocked out or forced to retreat. In fact, the German A-7V tank Mephisto, the only surviving A-7V tank, was knocked out during this battle and captured by the Australians a few months afterwards as a war trophy. However, despite the tanks, the Germans still suffered considerable losses, and their shortages of supplies made it impossible for them to launch another large-scale offensive to capture the town. The Allies had stopped them at Villers-Bretonneux, and on April 5th, Ludendorff called off the offensive, and this failed operation marked the beginning of the end for the Germans, as they would not have enough momentum to make any more large-scale attacks on the Western Front. With fresh American troops arriving and replenishing the ranks of the British and French armies, the Allies were then able to push the Germans all the way back to the Somme during the 100 Days Offensive, which helped bring an end to the war. With no supplies and no reinforcements to replenish their ranks, the Germans could do no more. Now, the German Spring Offensive also involved 4 big operations within it: Operation Michael, Georgette, Blucher York, and Gneisenau. However, this video I want to focus on the main overview of the Kaiserschlacht. Maybe in a future video, I'll go into more detail about these 4 specific operations, but for this episode, that is all I have time for, unfortunately. I do hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you had, please give me a like, subscribe to my channel, and leave your comments down below. Also, don't forget to like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. Until next time, see you on the battlefield.